Hi, welcome to Get Into Woodworking with me, Mitch Peacock. And today we're going to be looking at different finishes, and we're going to be putting a finish on our sliding lid box. There are an awful lot of finishes on the market. I'm just going to show you a few over the course of this series. We've got things like wood dyes and stains. We've got French polish ready mixed. And also we've got shellac flakes that we can mix. We've got wood fillers for producing a flat surface. We've got waxes, liming wax. And we've got liquid waxes, oils and finishing oils. And if you're new to woodworking, perhaps you'll only be familiar with polyurethane varnish. Something I definitely recommend is to keep an offcut of the actual wood that you're using in a project, and maybe 2 or 3 different species of wood. Do the surface preparation on it exactly the same as you have for the rest of your project. So you might be finished with a plain surface, or you might be sanding it. But put the same finish on your sample piece and then test out the finish you want to use on this first, just in case it doesn't work properly. To finish our sliding lid box, I'm going to introduce you to what I think are the 2 easiest to use finishes for beginners. That is a natural wax and a mixture of polyurethane varnish and white spirits, which is known as a wiping varnish. So I'm going to divide my sample piece into 2, and on one side I'm going to use the wax, and on the other side I'm going to use the wiping varnish. Wax is definitely the easiest. It's this one's by Chestnut Products and it's called WOmadeOD. Looks and smells quite nice. And I tend to apply it either with a cotton rag or a paper towel. Simply ball it up round a finger and just apply it to the surface fairly liberally. And that needs to be left just for a few minutes, and then we can buff it off. Now that wax should be ready to buff off now. And that's just taking a clean paper towel, rub off any of the excess. And then buff in circles until it isn't sticky anymore. And you'll have to keep changing the paper. Roughened up piece of paper like that seems to work really well. And eventually you'll find it doesn't feel at all tacky. I personally like to finish off the buffing with an old woolen sock. The wiping varnish I make up by adding some white spirits to some ordinary polyurethane varnish at a ratio of 1 part varnish to 1 part white spirits. This is one I made up quite some time ago for a project. I didn't use it all and I didn't get rid of it. It does store quite well, but you will find it forms a skin. When I looked in here earlier, I found a thick skin on there, and that's actually a good thing because it protects the rest of it from drying out. But we obviously have to remove that first. I carefully prise the skin from the edges of the jar so as not to make lots of little bits in there, and now with a disposable rubber glove I can just take that out, turn the glove inside out, and that's safely out the way. It has thickened a little bit, so I'll add a little bit more white spirit. This can be applied with a paper towel or lint-free cloth. You can use a brush, but it tends to leave more marks in it than if you just wipe it on with a rag. So we use the other half of our sample piece, and that's just wiped on. Because you've thinned it down, do watch out for runs. Spread it nice and thinly, and the white spirit acts as a solvent and helps to take it just below the surface of the wood, so you don't get the normal thick coat on top of the wood as you would with a standard polyurethane varnish. That just gets left to dry. Once it's dried, give it a light sanding with a high grit sandpaper, just to get rid of any little tags on the top, make it lovely and smooth, and then give it another coat. And if you want to build up a thick coat on there, you can reduce the ratio of white spirits to varnish to perhaps 1 part white spirits to 2 part varnish, but I wouldn't go any stronger than that. The wiping varnish has had plenty of time to dry now. In fact, it's had about 24 hours since I first put it on. Got a very slight roughness to it, so I'm going to sand it. I've got some 400 grit paper here that's new, and I can tell by feeling that it's actually rougher than this 240 grit paper that's been used quite a bit. So on this occasion I'm going to use the used 240 grit paper because that will give me much finer sanding. I'll just wrap that around a flat block of MDF and just very light pressure . And that's lovely and smooth now. So I'll dust off first with a soft brush. That gets most of it off. And then I'm going to put some little bit of white spirit on a paper towel. And that takes any residual dust off. It'll also evaporate quite quickly, but because it's the same solvent that we're using to thin out our varnish, it doesn't matter if it hasn't dried completely. So a little bit of the wiping varnish again, apply that thinly. So we put quite a bit on there, so I'm going to just wipe off any excess. And we can leave that to dry. Something worth pointing out at this stage is the difference in the colour of the finish. The natural beeswax has hardly changed the colour of the wood at all, whereas the wiping varnish has obviously got some sort of pigment in there and has also brought out the grain a bit more. It's another reason why you really need to do a sample piece before you complete your box, and you'll know that you're getting the result you expect. When you've decided on the finish you want to use, try and work out a method of working which will support the object so that you can put finish on perhaps half the sides and leave it to dry before turning it over and completing the other side. Whatever finish you decide to use, why not enter your box into the competition that's currently running on my website, WOmadeOD.co.uk. Take care and I'll see you next time.